Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our CEO lecture. You've got to look at the seats. There's an empty row right in the front. Come on down. Welcome to all of you. Special welcome to President John Garvey. President Garvey, a round of applause for our president. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. DeVos. Doug is co-chair of Amway Corporation, and he was previously for 16 years the president of Amway. Amway is a fascinating company, one of the largest family-owned companies with $8 million in revenues per year. So it has $8 billion in revenues per year. But what's particularly special about it is it follows a direct sales method, which means that Amway's success is built on the success of over 1 million business owners working within Amway. 1 million individual business owners. So you know, we're talking about principled entrepreneurship. Here's a company that's enabling 1 million entrepreneurs. It's really fascinating. We did not have Doug with us, who has a passion for principled entrepreneurship, so we're aware about his experiences there. He's on many civic and business organizations, too many to mention. I want to highlight one in particular, the National Constitutional Center up in Philadelphia, of which Doug is the chair of the executive committee. I also know there's a lot of sports enthusiasts in the Busch school. Doug is involved in sports in a number of ways. I thought just to make a visual of this, any of you who are playing varsity sports, the Patrick, can you stand up? Everybody is playing varsity. Everybody who's playing sport, please stand. If you're playing engineer, please stand. Or if you're playing basketball, please stand. Okay, so you're good company here. Give yourself a round of applause. Yeah, this is like that. Thank you. So, Doug attended Purdue, where he was quarterback of the football team. His family owns Orlando Magic, the basketball team. And Doug is also, like myself, passionate in the sport of sailing, and is the principal of American Magic, which is the America's Cup team for the U.S. So, there are lots from Doug, and we don't have a lot of time for questions afterwards. So those of you online can chat in your questions. Those of you in the room, we look forward to your questions. But please give a warm Busch welcome to Dr. DeVos.
Well, thank you, everybody. What an honor it is to have a chance to share a few thoughts tonight. As Andrew said, we're going to I'm going to try to share a few thoughts and hopefully spark a few questions and discussion as we go along here. I can ramble on way long, so I'm going to need some help. If we get into this, I'll just tell me to stop talking so we can move forward. And I just want to kind of start just to level set a little bit. And it was very nice in comments and of introduction. But let's just kind of level set. And this was a phrase that my father would use many times when he would be introduced. And he would, many nice things would be said. And we just have to say, well, let's just get straight here. I'm a sinner, saved by grace through Jesus Christ. And that just gets foundational, fundamental. And that connects all of us together. And that's a belief statement that's important in my life, and I trust it's important in your life. And it puts us in a place where we can figure out then together, what does that mean for us? What's God going to do with our lives? How do we take it forward from here? And so let me share some experiences that I've had in the Amway business, and again, a bit of a context, and I hope it's helpful for you as you consider the next steps in your life as you go forward. So as was said, it's a family business. My father and his business partner, Dave and Amway, started the Amway business in 1959. What they really started was a relationship and a friendship when they were in high school. My dad noticed that this other guy at school had a car, He was tired of riding the bus or walking to school or whatever he had to do. Presumably he had to walk uphill both ways in the cold, but presumably he figured that out and found Jay and said, "I'll pay you for gas money if you let me, give me a ride to school." They developed an incredible friendship, and they spent all their time talking about wanting to get in business together. This was their passion, this idea, let's get into business together. Whatever we do, let's get into business together. And of course, the times it's 1940, so they go off to serve in World War II. They exchange letters back and forth saying, someday this war is going to end. Someday we're going to let's get in business together. Someday we're going to have a business. And they had this idea all the time, this passion, this idea to be in business. Now let me fast forward a little bit again to kind of put the pieces in place. And I'll go back to the story, so forgive me for bouncing around a little bit. So, as somewhere in the 90s, as my father was getting older and Jay Van Anda, his business partner, was getting older, and we were transitioning to the second generation, we had spent some time saying, you need to talk about some of these founding principles that were really important for you. What were some of the things that were absolutely vital for you as the business got started? And they talked about this idea. We talked about four things: freedom, family, hope, and reward. Freedom, that people would be free to have a business of their own, to start a business. If you gave somebody an opportunity, we believed they would do something with it, and they would do something good with it. And that's where we were going to focus our attention. Second, family. In the Amway business, when you start a business of your own, you're connected. You and your spouse are together. We had a lot of times in some direct selling companies where the women would be doing all the work, and the guys would never know exactly what to do. And there were others in those days where the guys were doing things and the gals wouldn't know what to do. And they said, this should be a couple. We should do it together as a family. We don't want to pull you apart. We want to bring you together. And we have many people who have their own Amway businesses today that are in the third and now some of the fourth generation and continuing on. So family was important for us. Hope was the third element that said that no matter where you are or what you're struggling with, you can create a new future. You can do something different. Don't get hung up or stuck because of the baggage in your past. Find a way to move forward towards goals that you set in your future. And reward, whatever you do, there should be a return, a reward for that, whether it's financial or non-financial. In our business, some of the greatest rewards are recognition, celebration, experiences that we share with people. And certainly there's financial rewards as well. But those are kind of four elements. And at our 50th anniversary, when we were talking about, my dad was still living at the time, and we brought our leaders, the entrepreneurs from around the world together, and began to have this conversation. And my father kind of went through that again just to kind of remind us, so we knew who we were, we knew why we were doing what we're doing. He said, there's one thing that I need to tell you about now. All of those ideas are supported by our faith. It was the belief that we had in our faith that opened up some of these ideas or doors for us. And it was the foundation that we made in our lives that helped us to try to do the right thing in our business efforts. And when we made mistakes, we tried to learn from them and move on, but we began to kind of apply the ideas of virtue and principles in what we were doing, because it was who we were as people, and it was the lives we wanted to lead. And so this idea, and when we talk a lot of times in family business circles, I've gone to way too many family business seminars in the past, but I say you can't spread apart. You can't have Thanksgiving dinner and not expect you're going to talk about business issues when you're in a family business. You're just going to. Those things, there's always going to be an overlap. And I'd say the same is true with faith in business. You can't be someone at work or in one environment and then think you're going to be somebody different in another environment. You are who you are. And the greatest learnings I had from my parents, not just my father, from my parents, were the lives that they led. It wasn't just the stuff that they said. And I feel incredibly blessed that I had the opportunity to live an environment where I got to hear things. Certainly they talked a lot, but I got to watch them live it. And whether they were in public or at work or in private and in the family setting, they were the same people. So let me go through a little bit of some of the Amway story for you. Like I said, bounce forward, bounce back a little bit. So let me kind of go through. So, like I said, my dad and his business partner wanted to start a business together. And after World War II, they thought they would start a flying school. Everyone knew air power was a big part of the war. They came back home and said, we're going to start a flying school. The only problem is neither one of them knew how to fly. So usually we would start something in a field where you had knowledge. They had interest, but no knowledge. But that didn't stop them. They hired instructors. They were going to fly. They went out and got customers. That was their plan. They had to go out and get customers. Now they had a problem because the airport north of Grand Rapids, where we live in Michigan, wasn't finished in time. So they had to fly the planes and teach people how to fly off the river that was right next to them. So they bought boats for the planes, and they would teach people how to fly off the river. And there were people that got their license who had never flown a plane and actually landed on land. They had always flown off the water. Well, they found out that sometimes there's bad weather. You can't fly at night. You certainly can't teach at night, certainly in those days. And so they had some restrictions on their business. They figured, well, the first 40 hours of work, during the week is to get by, and then the next 40 you work is how you get ahead. And so they started their drive-in restaurant next to the airport. So then they would, the 8 days of drive-in restaurants, one would cook, one would bust the cars and kind of do that thing. And as my father would say, everybody should be in the restaurant business once. It's the hardest business. Anybody in the restaurant business, family business, restaurant business, food service? It's hard, right? If people would eat on a consistent, regular basis and pattern throughout the day, it'd be awesome. But we all, it's different. Anyway, I won't go too far with that. But that's a tough business. So they learned about the challenges. They started to have a bit of an adventurous spirit. Neither one of them were married at the time, and they said, they read a book about sailing to the Caribbean. And they said, that's what we want to do. We're going to get a boat, we're going to sail to the Caribbean. So they traded the planes, they kind of shut down that business. They traded planes, they found a boat out on the East Coast, and they wanted to sail to the Caribbean. Again, the only problem was they'd never sailed before. So they made it, a little ways down the coast. They kind of figured a few things out, and they made it all the way to Cuba before they sank. As my father would say, our boat leaked a lot. We didn't know that was dangerous. Any boat leaked. And we just turned the pumps on in the middle of the night, and when we were okay by the next day, we didn't know that the boat was that bad. So it gave way and it sank. The important part of that story is that they didn't give up. They wanted to do a trip to South America. So they got rescued, ended up in Puerto Rico, hopped freighters to get down the Caribbean, found their way into Colombia, went down the west coast of South America, over the Andes, back up around the east side, and back home. They continued the adventure. And I try to just pull a few things out of it. And if we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, you got to have a sense of adventure. And you got to try a few things that you may not feel prepared to do. That's how it goes. They didn't have the expertise in areas that they decided to jump into. But they had a belief, an idea. They wanted to be in the business together. And they were going to figure out a way to make it happen. And they learned a lot. But if you're going to be in business, you're going to be ready for some adventures. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have things that don't work out so well. And you better get comfortable with that as you go along, because nothing ever goes smoothly in life or in business. Good times are going to be followed by tough times. Tough times, you do it right, you work your way through, followed by good times. You just got to keep taking a step forward every day. Well, there's a couple other things I want to try to pull out of here. The first one that I wanted to talk about was this adventurous attitude. That if we're going to be entrepreneurs, getting in the business side of things, you're going to find a lot of competition coming at you. You got to have that adventurous attitude. right? And the difference between an ordeal and an adventure, you could have stuff happen to you, like, oh, it's terrible, this all happened to me. The difference between an ordeal and an adventure is your attitude, how you look at it, right? I had an incident with somebody, and we kind of had a bit of a collision, and we started to talk to figure it out, and he goes, well, what do you know, I never thought that would happen. Let's figure it out, the solution. This is amazing. He says, well, the only difference between ordeal and an attitude, or an adventure, is your attitude. I got a good attitude. You're the kind of guy I like to hit. You know, that's what I need. It's going to be an adventurous attitude and journey as you go. The other thing I want to encourage about it is this idea of a belief in people. We all know we need good products. We all know we need that good service, and we have good marketing, and we have all these other operational aspects, but it all comes down to people. Believing in people. Every business leader tells you that. Well, we learned that in our business early on, and I learned that when we were in Malaysia. I was still in high school at the time, and we had started the Amway business in Malaysia in the 1970s. We'd started in 1959 in the U.S., moved to Canada, moved to markets around the world. In Malaysia in the mid-70s, it's the late 1970s. We were there at one of our first Amway meetings that we're having. We had a few thousand people who were coming to the meeting. The business had grown very, very nicely. And however it happened, the Amway staff there had set up a meeting for my father with the Prime Minister of Malaysia. And it was a very interesting opportunity. And they had this great conversation. And my father was telling me about it. He said we talked about economic issues and business issues in general. And he said the Prime Minister went on. He said, right now it's kind of tough in Malaysia. We're having a tough time. He said, our economy is struggling. He said, because our greatest natural resources in Malaysia are copper, tin, and oil. And all of those, the prices of all those commodities are depressed on the global market, and therefore we're having a tough time. Our economy is suffering, kind of went through that sort of discussion. And then he pivoted and he looked at my dad and he said, but you flew halfway around the world, you have thousands of people coming to this meeting now, you've got this business that's growing very, very nicely. He says, well, tell me about it. And Father said, well, Mr. Prime Minister, you may believe that the greatest natural resources in Malaysia are copper, tin, and oil. But in the Amway business, we believe the greatest natural resources in Malaysia are the people of Malaysia. And we invest in people. Fundamentally turning things upside down. Said earlier, they don't go to work for us. They go to work for themselves. Now we're in a relationship, a partnership, we provide products, we provide support, we provide all those sorts of things. But their success or failure is up to them. So we continue this idea, we believe in people. And that if you're going to be in business or as an entrepreneur, you've got to surround yourself, find mentors, find people in your life who can help you move forward and can open your mind to greater possibilities and greater opportunities. Maybe even in a university. And you come here and you meet people and you're hearing teaching and learning and knowledge and gaining understanding. Not just transactional. It's a relationship. You just had a group from somewhere in the 1980s, long, long time ago, like when I was in college, right? That was just here, alumni groups coming back. It's important to stay connected, to keep learning, and to keep moving forward. I think it's this idea of believing in people, because people are going to develop the ideas, people are going to create the innovations, people are going to develop that entrepreneurial spirit of solving the challenges that we face, not only in business, but that we face in our community, that we face in our world. And we have to keep encouraging people to dream big and think of new things and find ways to surround them and help find the ideas that work. And if they don't work, stop doing it, move and do something else. Doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you just failed at that opportunity. You're going to find the next one. Move on. Move forward. always believe in people. Third element that I think is important for us is to stay curious. You know, normally at situations like this, when I want to kind of hit something and find a good illustration with great insights and meaning, I go to comedy. I go to Monty Python. Anybody know Monty Python? Too old? I mean, you know. Okay, I'm going to advance a little bit and talk about Ted Lasso. Anybody watch Ted Lasso? Anybody know that show? Okay. You may have seen the show. You may have gone through this, but this idea of staying curious, it struck me so. Right? For those of you who haven't watched the show, he's an American football coach, kind of from the South, the Middle South, this charismatic, outgoing, positive attitude sort of person that you would see in a college football environment, and a bit somewhat stereotypical. He's hired to be an English football coach, and of course, it's a mess. The people there don't like him. He's trying to figure this out. It has all these funny situations, and the team's not doing that well. The team itself is in a bit of a mess. It's got new owner, old owner, all this distraction. They're in a bar at the end of the, close to the end of the season. Things aren't going well. And the old owner comes in. People in the bar aren't really happy with the coach. They're kind of having this tense situation. The old owner comes in and is, trying to say, hey, it was never this bad when I was the owner, right? And our wonderful hero coach, Ted Lasso, comes up to the bar and grabs a dart and throws it at the dartboard and goes, "Throw 3 darts? Anyone should make a bet. Right? I win the bet, you leave us alone and you let us go on with this thing. If you win the bet, you win the game, then you get to pick the starting lineup." It's a good little kind of fun thing. This gentleman reaches into his pocket, right? Takes out his own specialized set of darts from his own specialized dart case. It must have been balanced perfectly for him so he would know how to throw. He says, "Okay, I'll take you on in that bet." You can see where this is going, right? So our hero of the story, Ted Lasso, is getting beat badly. He kind of turns to the bartender and says, "Okay, how am I doing with the score here?" She goes, "Well, you're way behind. You need virtually a miraculous shot, 3 shots, could say, to win the game." So he turns back and he grabs his dart. He starts to talk to the old owner and he says, "Rupert, guy's name, he goes, people have been underestimating me my whole life." He said, and it reminds me of something I saw a long time ago. He said, when I was growing up, he said, be curious, not judgmental. And he takes his dart and he throws it and he hits the first of his miraculous shots that he needs to hit to win. And he kind of looks at him and says, if you were curious and not judgmental, you might have asked me, "Ted, have you ever played darts before?" And I would have said, "Yes, I have." Every day from when I was 10 to 16, the story goes on, as you can imagine. Throws the next 2 darts, creates this miraculous score, wins the game, the crowd goes crazy, drinks for everybody. It was such a simple but powerful statement. Because in life, as we get older, we tend to get less curious. We tend to like to preach and not learn. We tend to kind of avoid asking questions and just try to fill the room with the things that we want to get off our chest. And if you're going to be good in business, you're going to be good in life, ask questions. Stay curious. How did you succeed? What did you fail with? How did you come back? Where did you go from that? It's actually a lot of fun having those sorts of opportunities, because you'll get past the idea that maturity takes that away from you. And you'll get to a point of learning for your whole life. This is a point in time, but like I said, it's a relationship with this university. And learning is something that we should do in our whole life. This idea of staying curious, asking questions, finding our way forward, I think is vital if we want to be good as an entrepreneur and in business. Well, the next thing, I got a couple of things. How am I doing on time? I should wrap up here in a couple minutes and do questions? Okay. Two more things, and then we'll kind of open it up for any questions we can take from there. Two more thoughts. Communicate your vision. If you have a dream, if you want to do something, if you have in mind a goal, an aspiration, an idea of something that's burning in your heart and a passion that you want to do, you got to find a way to talk about it. How's anybody else going to know otherwise? You need to find that element. How would you describe it? Not just numbers. How would you describe it? What are your passions? What do you feel God's calling you to do? How are you going to be in a position to live your life as an expression of your faith, as an expression of your values, in a way that you can bring value to the people around you and to your community? Find a way to talk about it. Describe it. You know, we had a mission in the Amway a number of years ago. We felt that we were in a position, we opened up in a number of new markets around the world, and we felt that we were in a position to double the business. We thought in the next 5 to 7 years we could double the size of the business. We began to talk about it, and we began to, put a whole bunch of, real CEO type of things on it, right? And we're going to really communicate this. And it ended up being a financial target that we communicated. And it just fell flat. It fell flat. People got it. Okay, good. I know what you're talking about, but what does that mean? It's just a number, especially in our business and the way we work. It was a corporate number. We didn't talk about how that we want to expect that our hope our people would be successful, the opportunities that they would achieve. We began to communicate like it was all about us, but not all about them. And it was from our head and not from our heart. When you have passion, when you have things that you want to do, find a way to communicate it from your heart. Luckily, we recovered. Luckily, we tried to be curious and learn and ask, why does nobody care about what we're saying? Well, because you're saying stupid stuff. Got it. What would you say differently? Oh, why don't you talk about this? Got it. We can learn. We can move on. Just because we're the CEO doesn't mean that we can't learn something, that we can't improve or fix it. But I believe it's important for you to communicate the things that are important to you so that you can move forward and have other people understand what you're trying to accomplish. Because if people are key to being successful, they're going to need to be part of the party. And they're going to need to understand what you're trying to do. So that's a little bit of the story. Then the last thing I would say is, nothing changes until you change. Right? Nothing's going to change until you make a decision to do something different in your life and in your business. And if you're starting a business, one thing to make a plan, another thing to take action. We were involved many years ago. Amway was involved with an organization called Ice Walk, or it was an effort called Ice Walk. It was to bring attention to the pollution that had reached the North Pole. And it was sponsored by the United Nations. And I was there representing the company at the United Nations, the big assembly hall. It was a really neat opportunity to be there. And the team members were talking about what they were going to do. And I remember sitting there looking around going, this is really cool. What a nice place. Great effort, all this other stuff. And then finally it hit me. At some point, these guys are going to have to take a step. They're going to have to load up their sleds and walk to the North Pole. They're going to have to do it. And I found sometimes in business situations where I would talk a lot of times about our strategy and articulate some of the things that would have to happen to get there, and then we would be held accountable by people around us. So, well, that's great. I appreciate that. I understand what you're talking about. Well, what are you going to do different? Nothing changes until a leader changes. What are you going to do differently? We had a situation where we had some people on our team who were not the right people to have on our team. The organization knew it, we knew it, they knew it. And when we talked about strategies and directions and things we wanted to accomplish, they weren't on board. And the organization was well aware of it. And until we addressed that, Only then did people know we were serious about wanting to achieve the goals that we had talked about before. Nothing changes until you change, until you do something differently to enjoy or achieve the success that you're trying to achieve. So those are a few things that I want to talk about. Just a few lessons that kind of came through. I hope you find that helpful in our story. And I hope you see the connection between trying to live our life. And in a family business, I can change rules and I can do different things, but I can't leave. I suppose you could sell it. We're not going to do that, but you could. So you're always trying to think in life, how do I continue to live my faith and values and express it in the life that I lead, whether it's the business, my family, our community, or in any situation you may find yourself. And I think that's the main thing. And in the business, I'll just close with this final thought. My father and mother had a lot of recognition for being very generous. And they were, and they taught that to us. We try as well. They were very, very generous in how they would share the blessings that they had received and that they had earned. And they talk about that, and we recognize many times people say, great philanthropist. Oh, you're a great philanthropist. My dad would say, you know how you become a great philanthropist? Yeah, and how you stay a great philanthropist? Have a good business. You got to generate the income before you can share it. You got to do something that creates value before you can share the value or the experience or the other sorts of things with people around you. And so my encouragement to you is that we stay curious, and kind of think of those things that I tried to talk through, and that that you find it helpful as you lead your life, and as you take action in the weeks, months, and years ahead to express your faith and your values in your life. So those are my comments. Thanks, everybody. Any questions or comments or topics?
We have questions online, questions in the room. If anybody has a question, just raise a hand. There's one in the middle there, and there has a microphone. You can get the microphone to the one in the middle up there. Okay, all right.
Online, you may need to, or else I'll repeat it. You just yell it, and I'll repeat it.
What do you say to people who are afraid to participate with Amway because of the negative connotations associated with pyramid?
What do you say to the people who are afraid associated with Amway because of the negative connotations associated with pyramid schemes? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
You'd say, come talk to us. So our thing all the time is to talk to people about, describing and helping people understand how our business model works. The legality of it, the way that we have been in the middle of creating the difference between, identifying what pyramid activities look like and what legitimate businesses look like. We've been doing that around the world. We've been doing it for our whole life. And so that fear is, we understand it, we get it. And so what we want to do is spend our time just talking to people. And I think I would apply that to life. That's what we do in our business. We do that in life. If somebody has a different perception or a different perspective and they don't agree with you, have the conversation. Let me tell you, I'm not trying to talk you into something. I'm at least trying to let you know who I am and maybe share some more information about it. And so that's what we find is we'll just tell you who we are. And it's up to you to make the decision if you want to keep the conversation going or move on and do something else. Or 2 cents. Yes, sir. I didn't hear the question. I don't know if you can turn the microphone on.
I think it was a repeat of the previous question, but asking for some more elaboration of the distinction.
Give us an insight onto what that conversation would actually look like.
Oh, well, I'll give you direct selling 101, and then is, pyramids have kind of, 3 characteristics, right? One, they don't have a product of quality that has value in the marketplace. They think it's a coin or this or that, something that really doesn't have value in the marketplace. 2, the upfront cost of getting started with it, you got to pay a lot of money or buy a lot of inventory, 2 sorts of things. So, hey, here's a product that you need. If you really want to get started, boy, you need to You got to buy 10,000 of these things, or whatever the case may be. And then 3 is your exit of that is to talk the next person into buying that product, right? So you make your money by not selling a product to a customer, but by moving your inventory or finding the next poor person who you can talk into making the same mistake that you made. That's generally how a pyramid works, right? So in our business, you know, we manufacture our own products, have our own R&D facilities, we have patents all over the place, you know, that sort of thing. So we have a product that brings value to the marketplace. Secondly, to join the Amway business is a very modest kind of administrative fee that you can have back if you don't want to. If you want to quit, there's no inventory, you know, required, things of that nature. When you want to order a product, order it to ship it to you, or ship it to your customers. And third, you could sponsor everybody in this room. You won't make a dime until somebody sells a product to somebody. And once the product is sold to an end user, to a customer, that's when income starts to find its way into the sales organization. So those are those 3 basic, you know, elements of how direct selling operates. And so if you have anybody where your product doesn't look that good, there's not a lot of background to it, beware. Number 2, if they want you to buy a lot of it, because boy, you know, beware. And number 3, if your only exit is to stick it to somebody else, beware. That help? Great, thanks. Yes, in the back.
I was going to ask, on your main points that you made, is there a main point that is rooted and is important than the other ones? And I was going to ask you, what makes you passionate about your business?
Well, I try not to, I try not to, pick just one thing. It's just not that simple for me in life. There's a collection of things. There's a set of conditions. There's, you know, things that may apply themselves in one way or another, at least in a business sense. And so I kind of try to think of things in a collection, if you will, or a suite of measures, or a suite of points that we want to think about. And what was the second part? I lost that part. I'm sorry? Passion. Oh, passion. Oh, my gosh. Well, what makes me passionate about the business is seeing people succeed. So in our business over the years, we have seen people from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds, become successful. We had, and that's the joy. We thought, as I said it earlier, we thought, you know, if people had an opportunity to do something with it, we believed in people. We had a consultant once who kind of came to us and said, well, you know, many years ago in the early days with my father and Jay, said, you know, you might want to back off on that, you know, because you don't want just anybody doing this, right? You got to teach them some sales skills. You might want to give them a test. You might want to make sure they have some business skills or communication skills or marketing experience and that sort of stuff. And my dad and Jay threw them out. They said, who are you going to leave out? Who do you want to leave out of this opportunity? Right? An opportunity for some. Our view is there's going to be an opportunity for everybody from all walks of life. And our business represents the face of a population. So our business tends to look like, you know, the United States in the United States. It looks like the Russian population in Russia. It looks like the Japanese population in Japan. The only twist is that more people who tend to not participate in the economy of that country, people who have a harder time participating in that economy, tend to be more attracted to us because we'll give them the same opportunity without removing it. And so we have an ability, and that's what makes me enthusiastic, because people from all walks of life, many people are just very successful in business, have done great things. They hated it. They hated it. They're a lawyer, they made it in the law firm, they hated it. They wanted time, they wanted other things. Whew, they found their way over here. Other people who didn't really have any other options found their way and became successful. And that's what makes me passionate. Thank you.
Can we take a question from online?
Okay.
Do you have any?
So one of the questions is, you've talked about investing in people in other countries, across the country. How important is it, and what kind of priority do you make of investing in your own home community?
What kind of
priority do you make of investing in your home community?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, a couple things on that. When we would go anywhere around the world, and they'd say, "Oh, welcome, we want you to be here. Invest in our country, our city, our whatever." And we said, "Oh, okay, but there's a way we have to invest to be efficient too, and effective." And so, from a business side, it doesn't mean you build manufacturing facilities everywhere you go. You just don't need that. And so, so you have to be very prudent and be thoughtful about how you do that. But when we talk about our community, we are on the same site that we were when we started. Small site in a little village called Ada, Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids. They had started in a small gas station. They had 2 or 3 acres around it that we filled. It's now 500 acres. The facility encompasses all those places. We felt very much, my dad and Jay, very much born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's our town. Much of the philanthropy, much of the giving of the company goes into our community there. In fact, we're really trying to figure out how to do it better. Because Grand Rapids is facing similar challenges to most other communities around. So we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how do we get involved with our community in a better way that applies some of the principles that have been successful in business, but can help people be successful in their lives as well. So we spend a lot of time in the communities where we operate. Certainly at home in our headquarters is where we live. It's our passion for what we feel called to do. And certainly in the communities around the world where we operate. And the other thing is a lot of our leaders, this is what we teach. And we don't do it top down like, hey, the company's told you to support this charity here and there. They pick charities all the time. They dive in. They do things in their community. They're active with their time, talent, and treasure in a variety of ways. And we want to encourage the spirit of giving, spirit of sharing, and then they have to figure out how they do it. What reflects best for them? Where are their passions, and how do they express it in their community? I had a question right there. Yeah.
I was just wondering, I appreciated your response to how Amway is different than other multi-level marketing companies. I was just curious, could you go into the product line, what the products look like?
Sure. So talking Amway again, we're back to the product line at Amway. Primarily, we started as a home care product. Our very first product was the very first biodegradable multi-purpose cleaner called liquid organic concentrate, and that was our thing in 1959. That this was a environmentally friendly product at that time, and then we moved in that direction. Before Amway, before they started, my dad and Jay sold Neutralite products, which were a company in California, supplements, health supplements, vitamins, vitamins primarily, that sort of thing. And in the 1970s, as Amway became successful, we bought Neutralite and put it back together. Today, Neutralite, our health and wellness product line is, I think, are we still the largest #1 brand of vitamins in the world? You wouldn't think about that, but it's a highly fragmented market, and Neutralite, and that's our biggest product line. About 55% of our product mix is in health and wellness. So it'd be our multivitamins, it would be our vitamin C, protein powder, nutritional snacks, foods, those sorts of things, so functional foods, kind of that area. And then from there, you would probably go to skincare, cosmetics a bit, which would be more like 15%. So from Neutralite down to skincare, but those are the 2 biggest. And then we still sell some air treatment, water treatment systems, like more durable goods, and then we still have some of our home care products, personal care products, soaps, shampoos, things of that nature. So that kind of is a rounds out our product line, but health and wellness is really where we are as a company.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So prior to being the president and co-chair, did you consider other career options independent from Amway? If so, what were they, and why did you deviate?
Okay. One of the things in the family business is you grow up inside this business, and this was an atmosphere I always wanted to be part of. I loved it. I loved the things we talked about, the stories we heard, the people that I met, just wonderful people who were positive about their life going forward. So I never really thought of any career opportunities different. I did play football. I practiced football. I should clarify that. You know, the real people played on Saturday. I watched them play on Saturday. I practiced all week. So I knew that wasn't going to be a route for me. But I always wanted to be part of the Amway business. And I was challenged actually by a friend of my father who's a pastor. You know, as I was coming out of school, and he said, you know, look, I know you can get a job there. You know, you're going to be able to go get a job. That's pretty much a given. But if that's all you're trying to do, save us all the trouble. Because you're just going to mess up the works. You're just going to be there. No one's going to know what to do with you. You know, you're the boss's kid, and you're just going to cause trouble. So, you know, end it for us now if that's not what you want to do. And he really challenged me to think about it. And rather than just default into it, but to make a positive decision into it. And I reflected on that and thought about it and prayed a lot. And I said, I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I started down the track very early, right after I graduated from Purdue and the business school there. And I never looked back. I just loved the opportunities that I had and continued to develop different parts of the company I worked in, different markets. We lived in Europe for a couple of years. We didn't move to Asia, but I spent a lot of time through our markets in Asia, and just love the business all the way through. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm interested in your sport involvement.
Mm-hmm.
I guess how did you get involved with Magic, and if you are involved with Magic, then you're also involved with Silver.
Yes. Okay, so sports involvement and how do you get involved in the Magic is actually a very, very long story. I'll try to give you the short version. But, we have been interested, we've always been kind of a sporty family. And many years ago, the same pastor who challenged me about my career choice was one of the very first pastors who was starting chapels for baseball players and football players who were playing games on Sunday and they wouldn't go to church. And so rather than condemning them, he wanted to bring the gospel to them. And my dad was very involved with that. And one of the first teams that we got deeply involved with was the Dallas Cowboys when Tom Landry was the coach. You're going back in the late, in the 70s and that sort of time frame. And so, and I think there was a sale at one point where there was an idea that, when the team got sold, I can't remember when that was, that, every Amway distributor would put in $1 and we could buy the team as a company. It never worked, but there was this interest level. So in 1990, the city of Orlando had a basketball team. The Magic had just started there. They were trying to get a baseball expansion. The ownership group around that collapsed, and through a friend of a friend in the contact, going back to the same pastor, found Dad and said, would you be the financial backing for this baseball effort? And Dad said, maybe. And that was good enough, so it got us in the process, and he got to know the people in Orlando, and kind of was intrigued with it, but said, baseball is not the right way. Well, the franchises were awarded other places, but we stayed close to the basketball team. We said, we're from Michigan, and there's a sport to be played in Florida. It'd be nice if that sport was played in the winter, because then we could go to the games and enjoy it, because we kind of don't want to get out of Michigan in the winter, and so for a variety of reasons, and a couple others that I think are important. Number one, from a family perspective, this would be something that would bring the family together. I talked about family and business at the Thanksgiving table. A lot of times those conversations don't go well. We had a lot of conversations in our family that didn't go well. But you're always going to be talking sports, and you're always going to have something to cheer for, even if the team's not doing that well. Yeah, something to talk about. And so the vision or the idea that Dad had was that it would be something to keep the family together. And this is how business could bring us together as a family and give us something to talk about and give us something to do together where, it wasn't a big company where you're fighting for positions or who's going to run it or this and that. It's kind of, different enough that we can all be in it together. And two, the second thing was the drive to get into sports was that you can reach people through sports that you'd never reach through a traditional business. We came back right after we announced the purchase 30 years ago, and there's a reporter who flew down with us. My brother and I flew down from Michigan, to cover the press conference, and we're flying back with him, and we were just kind of joking or talking about the difference between sports and business, you know. And when somebody writes something about Amway, you know, they might write it once every few years. It's usually because we made a mistake and they want to blast us, you know, or something like that. And this reporter said, you know, you want a 3-game losing streak? It's going to be national news. They're going to talk about this thing all the time. And the doors that it can open in the community, and the connections and the relationships that you can build in the community through sports teams and activities, that's a whole new world opening up. And so that was the drive to do it, was to move in that direction. And it does include the Solar Bears. It includes the Lakeland Magic, which is the D-League team. And we've done a few other things in Orlando in the sports world there as well. More than you wanted to know. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions on the season. We start, it's the 19th today. Opening nights tomorrow. We play the San Antonio Spurs. Anyone from San Antonio? Good. Nobody's from San Antonio. You all get to be Magic fans tomorrow. Thank you. You need all the help we can get. We're rebuilding again. Still.
I think we have another online.
Okay.
So your dad's boat sank.
Yeah.
And the adventure continued. Did you have a moment in your career that was like that, a big challenge where you had to decide that the adventure had to continue?
Well, 2 of them actually. You know, one, I'll give you a business context. In the Amway business, we started in China. We've been operating in Hong Kong and Taiwan since the 80s, and we started in China in 1995. And there's no real, as we talk about regulations here, direct selling, there's no real regulation about direct selling. So a lot of bad operators were acting very pyramidal, you know, in the marketplace, causing tremendous disruption. And in 1998, 2 years, the business was going great. We're doing all these good things. They banned direct selling as an industry. They just said, that's it, you're all gone. We had built a huge manufacturing facility there. We made all these investments. And so that was one of those moments where the boat felt like it sank. Luckily, we were very well advised. The woman who was running Amway China for us said, settle down. We'll work through this. You know, they have real problems in the marketplace. There's really bad things going on. Work with the government. Let's, you know, differentiate ourselves about how we're legitimate. And we worked through that period of time. And they eventually developed direct selling legislation. They did distinguish between legitimate and fraud, you know, operations, and the industry has thrived since then over the years. So that was one. And the second one was actually a sailing adventure, very similar, in the America's Cup that Andrew talked about. If you have ever wondered if a boat, a 75-foot boat, can fly, I can tell you it does, but when it lands, it's not good. These boats are on foils. They fly above the water, but we went out of control. The boat went about 30 feet up in the air, crashed on the water, put a hole in the boat sank. Now, we were, you know, it was in the middle of the competition. We had about 2 weeks left to try to get the boat repaired to get on the start line. It didn't sink to the bottom. It was sunk. It was completely submerged, but we were able to keep it on the surface, put, you know, bags around it, floats around it, keep it, get it up. We kind of put a sail around the hole to kind of keep more water from coming in. We got the boat back, we repaired it, and we made the next race that we had to make. And the team did about 8 weeks of work in about 8 days to get the boat ready. Unfortunately, we were not successful in the next stage of the competition, but we were at least back in sailing. So he did an amazing job. But that was one of those times where you just want to cry and go home. But we didn't. We stuck it out. Yes. Yeah. What's our timing? Yep.
So I know you talked a lot about like curiosity and always asking questions and things like that. And, you know, like kids oftentimes are, you know, being young, be curious and stuff like that. And then, you know, it sounds like a lot of people have at least that curiosity. I'm wondering, you know, what are some of the ways that you've been able to, you know, keep asking questions, keep curious, and drive your whole life with business?
Sure. So the question is, how do you stay curious and how do you avoid getting bored with it? I think it just kind of comes, you know, it's got to come from the inside. You know, you got to just kind of look at things around you and go, how does that work? You know, how does that work? How do you do that? What's that business? How do you make that operate? You know, where's your cell phone? I don't know how cell phones work, so I talked to somebody from the cell. How does this work? How did you do it? Who discovered that? How do they operate? How do you just kind of have a genuine curiosity, and just if you spend some time, I would say just be observant and look around and challenge yourself. Go, how does that work? How do you put a photo on a screen like that and put it in the back? How do you do these sorts of, I mean, it may be simple. Whoever's doing it, it's very simple for them. They have a simple process. Show me a photo, we'll put that up there, get it for you in a day or two. How do they do that? I just find it fascinating when it's, how it's made stuff on TV or other sorts of things. I think it's important to challenge yourself to be in that position and to think through, how am I going to turn this into a question? I guess it's a perpetual Jeopardy episode, right? So, don't just have the answer. How do you frame it, as a question? And how do you learn about somebody? So tell me your name. Where's your name? Where's it from? Is it a family name? What part of the world is that from? Okay, that's great. Tell me about your family, your parents, your sisters, your brothers. It's a pretty simple process. Tell me about it. Elaborate on that. Tell me more. Fill me in. It was a simple thing. I actually went to a class when I first started. One of the areas I worked in was human resources, and they taught me how to interview people. And that's all they basically. It's pretty simple. Just keep asking questions, and when they stop talking, just tell them to elaborate more. They want the job, they'll keep talking. And that's kind of how I learned it. And you really find, if you're in that position, you're really trying to find out about something. Tell me about you. Tell me about you. How do you think? Why do you think that way? What's going on? And it's actually a lot of fun, along the way. And I think that's how you avoid getting bored with it. Again, my father gave me a great story too of where, he was a sailor, he was with a group, he was asked about sailing, and he began to tell all the stuff about sailing, what we had done, this and that, the other thing about this race and that sort of sailing adventure. And then the other guy said, well, I have a boat. And my dad, he told me the story, said I felt like an idiot because I just went rambling on about me, and I forgot to ask about him. And so it's one of those things that you fail, Tell me about you. What are you doing? You have plenty of time to, tell about yourself. But find out about somebody. It's actually a lot of fun. All right. Anything else? Can I'll just, should I bring it to a close then? I'll just thank you all for your time, attention. I'll encourage you to keep moving forward. Keep whatever you're dreaming, keep dreaming it big. And I'm reminded a little bit of a time, not exactly like this, but it was I don't think I told this story here. I did, raise your hand and I will stop repeating it. But my father spoke to a graduating class, Michigan State University, 2009. Most of the speakers were talking about how tough it was because of the Great Recession, all the things are there. You're probably going to graduate, not have a job, this sort of stuff. My dad jumped and said, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. There's still opportunity out there. And if you can't find a job, start your own business. And if someone tells us it's not the right time, don't believe it. Because it's the only time you got. It's the only time you've got. God has put you here and has put us together in this place, and life is real short. It's the only time we have. You're only going to be in this stage of your life for a short period of time. And you can wait for everything to come together, and you can stick around and wait for the right time and wait for the right moment, or you can make a decision and do something. Because now is the only time we've got. So wonder what God has in store. Be curious about that. God, what do you have in plan? Stay in prayer about it. Think about it. And then take steps forward in faith. That would be my encouragement. So thank you for the opportunity to have a time with you.
Thank you. Bob is going to hang on a bit longer in case any of you have any one-on-one questions, and the rest of you have a great evening.